Welcome back, folks. Welcome to part two, History of History. Last time we left off with a little bit of introduction to Themistocles, the Roman, well, not the Roman, sorry, the Greek historian and Athenian general from 460 to 400 BC. Now, this guy is pretty much, as we remember, is known as the father of scientific history. He takes on a different approach of Herodotus. As best we recall, is the father, the main patriarch, the god of the gods when it comes to history. He's the father of all. He is the Zeus. All right. So Herodotus, this man right here, the father of it all. But here's the concept: what actually Themistocles does. Now he's known as the scientific history, or the father of scientific history. So now, what is scientific history? How does he change the aspect of actually looking at history? Now, as you remember, he wrote his book on the history of the Peloponnesian War, which was pretty much the war from 431 to 404 BC between Athens and Greece. Okay, this falls way past the Greco-Persian Wars. Just a couple of years. You got to remember, this also gives you a chance of what it's like in the ancient world. War was a part of life. There is not a generation that experienced any form of peace in some way, shape, or form. So consider yourself pretty lucky, and remember, thus, the fact of being a historian is you gotta, and understanding and studying history is you gotta have that consciousness, all right, and understanding that, hey, we live in a pretty peaceful time compared to any of our ancestors that ever have lived. So we have it made, and because we are standing on the shoulders of giants and our ancestors, it's because of progress, and we know the history of all the pain, the misery, and the suffering that our ancestors have been through to get us to this point in time. And we should consider ourselves God blessed to be in the time that we live. When you are a historian, you get up every morning and you're like, it's not that bad. All right? We don't have plague. We don't have to worry about raiders coming and raiding the village. We don't have any of that. We still have a lot of different kind of forms of we're getting our asses taxed off, but we still have that. As long as there's humans, there's still going to be all those deadly sins of everything that we come into the Garden of Eden, right? So either or, humanity is still good and bad, all right, and it always will be both. We'll always be Nephilim, all right, until Judgment Day, and well, I'm telling you, it should be someday here soon. Would be great. I can tell you that much. Now, Themistocles actually does a lot. He really goes forth when he writes his book. I don't have his book with me, unfortunately, but it is a good read, and it's one of the books that you have to read and understand how he views history. What he does differently from Herodotus is he takes a lot of divinity and storytelling out of it. Okay, he's the guy that looks at the cause and effect, right? He's looking at the human nature, okay, rather than the divine intervention of what's going on. Okay, he does a lot of these things. He does a really historical analysis, and also you can put it into political theory. Okay, because he also does the political realism, but I'm not gonna get into that one. But he does these methods and does a lot of observations. He gathers facts. All right. Remember, he was an Athenian general during the war, so he understood. But he wanted to know a lot of things. He gathered facts. He did eyewitness accounts. He did a lot of, pretty much, talking to people. Okay, like a journalist. And he did that. And he wanted to really not know why the gods of Mount Olympus was doing this, because he knew it was all human nature. He wanted to understand, and he actually puts it in his book to pretty much give us the idea this is how we have to view history. Because where's the cause and effect? This is all humans. Alright, this is human action, this is human behavior, this is human nature. And he really teaches that you have to apply it to history. So he doesn't put in the gods, he doesn't put in storytelling, he puts in actual factual evidence during his time, despite the fact that he was a general, with the Athenians. And he even realized a lot of things, he looks at before, when you have the great pestilence that happens in Athens. Remember, the war happens in 431. Okay, 432, 431. And the Great Pestilence is 430 to 429 BC in Athens. Athens is not a good start. Now, strategically, he looks at this as, strategically, Athens is at its weakest right now. They're fighting disease. The plague is hitting that city. Thousands of dead a week. Stretching out bodies. It would be horrid. The stink, you can't imagine. All right, you can't imagine. Like recently, we just celebrated 83 years of the siege of Leningrad in Russia, and those 800 and some days, 900 days of siege, over 1 million people died in that city. So that's a test of human endurance. That's a test of Russian endurance. All right, yeah, sure, there was a cannibalism at times. People starved. It was not the greatest thing. It's being homeless, but worse. You're totally surrounded by Germans. You can't escape. You have no freedom. Only within the city. And getting bombarded. It's never greatest. Wish you could do this to Ottawa. But we tried. We tried. With the truckers rally. But still, it was kind of as it is. But he actually looks at it very differently. So he really takes it and he looks at it objectively and analyzes the events of what happened. He even looks into the foreign policy, not really foreign policy, but the domestic policy and the political policy of why Athens and even Sparta decided to go to war in the first place. This was different than Herodotus did. Herodotus just looked at everything, documented, put a little bit of detail into it, and collect the history. He collected the stories and put a little bit of thought of, and it compares it to the Greeks. Within the book itself, in the second book, you see a lot of it in the 9 books. He goes and he compares it to the Greeks. This was different for the Greeks. He's like, why am I doing this? And this is how he's describing a ritual that they're performing. And he compares it to the Greeks, and the thing is, you get the Greek perspective, is this is how they do it, but you also get the other perspective, how the Egyptians or the Athenians are actually doing it. So it's pretty good how Herodotus does this. But the difference with Thucydides is basically he puts a lot of rational, human-driven reasons behind this war, not divinity. It wasn't caused by the gods, God's interference. Apollo, Athena, they didn't come down and be like, hey, let's get these two fuckers fighting. Okay, they didn't do that. All right, let's see who is the champion of all of Greece in the Greek world. It wasn't like that. In a sense, it was like that, but humans decided to think that, and this is the great thing about that. He also viewing human nature and making it pretty much the guide work of actually looking into history through the course of future generations. Learn from this war. Here's the causes and effects. Here's the human nature behind it. And it's pretty amazing. In comparison, though, he is very ethical and factual in his work when he writes the history of the War of the Peloponnesian. Okay? War. It's kind of insightful in so many ways. But here's the thing. So he really puts all that into effect. But that's why he's the scientific, because he takes a lot of proof and evidence and supports his statements and what's going on. Now, the difference is this exists how history is written for the next well over 1,000 years. Now, it doesn't really take until about 1795 to 1886. This is the birth dates of the next father. All right, this is the godfathers of history. Okay, these are the guys in the whole hierarchy, if you want to put it through time, but also, the monarchy kind of dynasty through history. Okay, we look at it that way. So this is pretty much how it goes. Now, Leopold Rankin, that's when he was born. Now, he's the father of modern history. All right, he is an American-German historian for the 19th century. He actually creates history as what we know it as today, an academic discipline. Before, it was just a subject. All right, it was like literature. It was like philosophy. It was just something that, it was almost like treated like, even with Thucydides and Herodotus' methods, it was still pretty much treated as it was a storytelling, like it was an old oral tradition written on paper. All right, but people didn't really study it. They didn't really go right into it to figure out what it is and why it's important. But this guy actually changed everything. Now, you can go back in time and you probably want to kick this guy's ass because this is the guy that actually starts what everything you did in high school. You went to history class. What you do? You wrote a history paper. What's it require? Research. A lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of writing. This is why knowing history develops these skills for you. So, very, very good. All right? You put forth the thesis. You lay down the evidence. Here's your sources. This is where it all comes from. And even the concept of doing a history seminar or a lecture. This is the guy, Leopold Rankin, actually does this. Now, he does it very well, and he sets up the stage for everything of that and developing these methods and the pretty much seminar system that we know of today. He kind of helped history to become this evidence-based academic discipline, which was totally separate from anything else. He made it its own entity, and he does it very well. Now, he also developed the idea of archival research. Now, in university, you will do this. You will go to the archives. Okay, I'll give you an example. We had to go to the archives. We had to do this whole thing in the graveyard. All right, those were statistics and shit comes in really good. So you go to an old graveyard. You document everybody that died there. Trust me, there's nobody living there. If there is, chances are they're homeless. Shitty part is, that's how it goes. So we went to a graveyard and we had to document well over 100 gravestones. Put the people's names down, birth dates, death dates, who they were, blah blah, whatever was on the tombstone. Even if it said loving memory of a father, mother, whatever. So I had to document all this. Then you go to the archives and you find these people. And trust me, they're all there. Right? You already left a footnote in history. Alright, what you do now echoes eternity. Well, that eternity is stuck in the archives. So you go and you find these people, then you start researching their death certificates, and you realize how they died. They died of typhoid, they died of fever, one guy died of drowning, one guy actually got ran over by a cart, or a horse and buggy in the street, and that actually became a newspaper article that we found from that time in the 1800s in Fredericton. So it was pretty cool to find these stories. Like, we found out how this guy died. This is the investigation part of history. So it wasn't just he died of an accident. It's all it said, died of an accident. Well, what kind of accident? And we had to look through it, and then we find out it's the same dude in the newspaper at that time. It was amazing. A guy actually died saving his brother drowning. I remember these because they're so out of the ordinary. He died saving his brother that could swim. He could swim, but both of them together, he saved his brother, but he died drowning, saving his brother. And that was in the newspaper. That was, I think, it was like on the front page of the newspaper in Fredericton at the time in the mid 1800s. And this was a very big news event, obviously. It was pretty interesting how it all went down. Eyewitness accounts, what his brother said. They had, it was pretty cool. This guy died a hero. He saved his brother from drowning, but he drowned in the process. So he had like hero status, right? You should be on a mark somewhere, you know, like 9/11 plaque, kind of a hero. So it was pretty amazing the things you come across. You find out how many people died of a certain disease. Okay, you kind of understand that, there was a pandemic at a time in Fredericton with influenza. Okay, around the time of the Spanish flu, a lot of people died of that in Fredericton. Yeah, so you kind of determine, this is when this happened. There's a typhus. Oh yeah, you name it. It's awesome. We did well over 100, 150. We did the whole graveyard. On pretty much the west side of Fredericton, and it was pretty cool. Find out of all these people. You find out who was rich, who was poor, who was a blacksmith. You learn a lot, and some of them come up in the paper as, they owned a business. You didn't know, but they owned a business. Died in a construction accident of City Hall. That was another interesting one. He died of his injuries. according to the death certificate. So it was pretty cool how it all works. And they used different words too back then, so you had to kind of modernize it to understand it or to interpret it. But that's the thing, what he does. So the second thing is all those archival evidence and research to find out the evidence to suggest the case of the history. But he also puts primary sources. For instance, this is a primary source. Herodotus' Histories is a primary source. It's the first of its kind. It's the first, right? It's the primary source from its time. Same as Nicholas's History of the Peloponnesian War. That's the primary source because he wrote it at the time. Remember, a historian comes from Greek, which means witness. So these guys wrote their time. Most of them wrote a lot about their time. Alright? Now, a secondary source would be something like this. Alright? This guy, Edmund Gibbons, he's notorious in Roman history. He's one of the most famous historians in Roman history. He wrote this book that has been used now for well over 100 years. So it tells you how good this is as a source. It's not a primary source. It's a secondary source because he uses a lot of references. A primary source will not have a bibliography or footnotes. Copy that. Alright? So he wrote on the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. Now the Bible is a primary source. Okay? So, written at the time. So all these are primary sources, and he gives you that. And remember that in school. You have primary and secondary sources. So the primary source is the original source. Anything that has been written on the primary source from a historian is a secondary. Okay? Pretty easy to remember. But in high school, it was just like, oh man, I had to find a primary source, like a diary or journal from the time, archival evidence from the time. That's all primary sources. So you can thank Leopold for that one, okay? He is the father of modern history overall. So, and he really sets the standards, okay? He really sets the standards. Now, one person that most people don't really think of as a person that actually contributed to history, which is funny, the guy that corresponded with Catherine the Great, okay? He is one of the most enlightened philosophers during the Age of Enlightenment. And it is Voltaire. Okay, now Voltaire is an interesting case because he was born in 1694 he died in 1778. Okay, now he actually corresponded a lot with Catherine the Great. They have a really interesting, that's primary sources if you look it up today, between those two. They have severe correspondence with each other. They wrote each other about everything. It's really nice to look into those letters and this is one of the reasons why Catherine the Great was an enlightened Russian ruler in a lot of senses. And everything that she did is based upon the influence of her mentor, one of her mentors, Voltaire. And Voltaire's notorious. You learn him in philosophy class. He's one of the most famous philosophers of all time. If you don't know him, well, you're a fucking idiot and you lived under a rock. If you don't, go get to know this guy. He is very enlightened. He has a lot of good writings. And philosophy's over, of course. Now, he's known as the founder of modern historiography. Now, historiography is pretty much the study of history itself. All right, how history and the development of history and studying history developed. It's historiography summed up in a nutshell. But he actually, philosophical history. So he actually puts this forth, okay? Now, he uses a lot to the past to teach the future. We'll get into that, okay? And one thing about a historian is, remember, you have three: preserving the past, explaining the present, and forecasting the future. Those are your three main things to sum up as a historian, or when you study history, you can do this. A lot of historians actually predicted the future out of their lifetime. Okay? Pretty interesting. I don't think I'm that good, per se, but you can do it. We'll use an example because there's some pretty good ones, and how they point this out and be like, we could do this. But anyway, Voltaire actually revolutionized history by focusing on that, by using the past to teach the future, for reason, culture, arts, the social progress of humanity, through weird politics and warfare. He does actually contribute all to this, And as a historian, you have to basically realize that he actually contributes to history. He is one of the granddaddies. He is one of the godfathers. He is one of the ages through the dynasty of history itself. So he actually does contribute a lot to that. He takes it to superstition. He does a lot of Middle Ages, but not gonna get totally into Voltaire. It takes up a lot of time too. So we're just going through the basics. Now, about the future is pretty much simple. One of my favorite centuries to study is the 19th century. So much happening in Europe. It set the stage for the 20th century. Now, you gotta ask yourself, if you look in the 20th century, how does it set the stage for the last 25 years and for the next 75 years? And so far, it has shown itself. Okay? After the year 2000, sets the clock for the next century. Correct? Can't say it's not, because that's the reality of it. It's fucking fact. So, if history teaches everything, even including the future, well, one of the most famous British historians back about in the turn of the 20th century wrote a book about what happened in the year of revolution in 1848. This is the year of revolutions, or the springtime of nations. It was also nicknamed as called. Many revolutions broke out throughout that year throughout Europe. Okay, some places, Russia, it didn't happen, but most of Europe, it happened. It changed the course. It was a cause and effect of the Napoleonic age and what Napoleon had done, right? Now, it was 1848 was pretty much a foreshadowing of things to come. It was just not Napoleon and the French Revolution, but it was also more of a foreshadowing, because by this time those ideas evolved into other things, right? It was a seed plot of history, of crystallized ideas, and projected the pattern of things to come to determine the course of the following century. Okay, it's pretty much what the British historian Lois Lehman said. And when you look at it, then you realize it's like, oh, for fuck's sakes, he's right. Okay, what's all the seeds that come out? Was planted all across Europe that really showed its ugly faces. Well, not really its ugly faces, but its faces in the revolutions of 1848. Not the revolutions of 1830 or anything like that. But they really showed. You had nationalism. Well, that's one becomes one of the main causes of the First World War. And we see it today, and it's stuck with us like COVID. It's with us till the present day. It's here to stay. Democracy. All right? Liberalism, when it was not retarded. When liberalism actually was legit, this is pretty damn fucking good. Not like it is today. It turned its own history turned retarded. It inbreded itself too many times. It's not there. You also had socialism. Okay, Marxism came out of this, but socialism started to develop. That eventually helped Marxism and then communism. Okay, it predicted this, and those were all the seeds that were planted and were pretty much in all the narratives of the revolutions, why they started, and what was being fought for during that time. So the thing is, all these seeds was pretty much pattern recognition. So this stuff was happening now. Like, you had to say when we were growing up, there's a lot of gay rights things going, a lot of things like that. There's hints of it. The most common people don't give a shit. But the historians, and a lot of political scientists, especially, they see that, okay, this is a trend. This is going to happen. Some people actually predicted that gay rights would be happening during this time. It would need a liberal government for this shit to happen. And the same thing as legalizing weed. Remember that people dreamed about it. People, it's going to happen. It's just when. As soon as the idea starts and spreads, it's going to happen. But the question is, your lifetime, children's lifetime, it's going to happen. There's not really nothing but predictions to the end of the world. It's going to happen. Just when. Now, if you can nail the dates, you're a prophet. All right, 100% without question, right? There's like over 300 prophecies in the Bible about Jesus returning, and they all turn, and everything related to Jesus, and Jesus did it all, right? So those are prophecies, all right, in his lifetime. That's pretty impressive, all right? So if you take that for an example. But the thing is, too, with history, you also got to remember, you have all these godfathers of history up to the present day that developed what it is. And why is it significant? Why do you need to know it? And why people should actually have a basic understanding. Not just walk into high school without not learning nothing. All the skills that you learn from history itself is atrociously high. Okay? It is abundant. So, and you apply them to your own life, right? I know because of history growing up, I was a better reader, I was a better writer because of it, not just out of English class. I don't know, it just didn't work for me. I know some people it wouldn't work, okay, and I enjoyed that stuff, so. But one thing too with history is explained, okay? Now history itself has a partner, alright? Remember, a historian has two masters, the past and the present. You have to serve two masters. Well, I like to put it this way as a historian because you have two disciplines that you need to know. Alright? Remember Herodotus? What was the other thing? He was a historian and a what? A lot in his book. Geographer. Right? Now, this is a marriage of two disciplines. History is all explained through geography. Okay? Now, one can't live without the other. This is a marriage. Okay? This ain't a gay marriage, it's a straight one. So, because it's going to produce a nice, beautiful child that we have today called geopolitics. And I love geopolitics. It's awesome. It's like the ultimate chess match. You could predict a lot of things by geopolitics. But anyway, what's going on? Why did, what's the importance, for instance, in the modern age we live in? Why is it important for Trump to take Greenland? What's it benefit America? Would it benefit us? This is geopolitics at its best. And why take Venezuela? Well, that, you got to look at all the factors of why, cause and effect, right? So, the thing is, when it comes to that humanities marriage of history and geography, they come together. One can't survive without the other. They are bind into one flesh, if you will. Alright? They are married and they're sealed together and they are like union. They're not light and day. Alright? They're stuck together and they have a child, which is geopolitics. So, you gotta keep this in mind. Now, so this is a marriage. Now, everything has a father. Everybody has an origin story, right? Everybody flew out of the left nut if they're someone's dad, right? So, well, who's the father? Now, you think it was Herodotus. No. He's the founder of history. He's the father of history. Now, the father of geography comes well over 200 years later. Okay? Now, Eratosthenes is pretty much the father of geography. He's the guy that nails it. He lives, he worships. It's the only thing he's good at. That's the only thing he focuses on, is geography. And personally, for me, on a personal level, my first passion in life wasn't history. But what led me to my passion was geography. Alright? So even as a historian, you have to analyze yourself. So this is why I love geography. When I was a kid, I looked at map books. I loved mountains. I had to know every mountain in the world, every river, every brook, every lake. I had to know every city, country, everything. I loved looking at maps. I could sit there for hours just flipping through the map book and studying it. And I still enjoy it today. So for me, it's just the importance of geography. Okay, geography is very important to me. So at the same time, when I came to the world map, I was like, wait a minute. I had to ask myself the question. History can all be explained through geography, correct? We're going to see. Because without one or the other one doesn't exist. Well, the other one can't explain. They explain each other. Okay, they work with each other. They're on parallel universes. So how did the world map get the way it is today? It just didn't poof, spontaneously, there it is, right? How did it develop? It's because of geography plays a very important role in how humanity's developed. How everything, alright? We always like to say you're a product of your environment. Well, that is geography. History in a nutshell. Okay? That's their marriage. You're a product of your environment. Geopolitics. So, how this became a thing, okay? Like, geography is the canvas, right? And history is the paint. Alright? Pretty good comparison. It's one of my favorite quotes. And that's what makes sense to me. So when I got into geography, then I never got to grade 9, and I had a teacher named Miss Hubbard. She's the one that actually introduced me to my passion. Really great. I mean, learning social studies was great, but I was 7 and 8, and I wasn't mature enough to really figure this out. I really didn't care, just get it done. It was interesting, didn't really give two rat's asses. I was still into geography, but it explained a lot of Canadian history when I looked at geography. But when I taught her, it was ancient history. So she taught me, and she gave me a lot of encouragement growing up. She's like, this is you. I remember when she said it, this is you. And I was like, what do you mean this is you? I'm grade 9. I don't give, I'm looking for tail, boy. I'm looking for tail. And I was like, we're going to be drinking this weekend. But at the same time, it was just like I had that academic spirit, and she taught me and she fostered me into my passion. So she's like, in ancient history, start it, and I just loved it. It was a book called Odyssey Through the Ages, and first textbook of just ancient history, and I loved it. And geography went with it. Yeah, the first thing in world history you have to know is geography. You got to know where these cities are on a map. You got to know how everything formed, what this empire is. In 900 BC, this is what the world looked like. This is what the world looked like in 900 AD. And you got to know the entire development of it. And if you don't, well, tough titty. Now, when you combine the both, it blends the study of past human events, cultures, and even the development of civilizations on its own scale. It's not just the exploration of the Earth's physical features, like mountain ranges and mountains and lakes. It's not just that, okay? It's the human-environment interactions is key between history, okay? For instance, now, how did it develop? How did the environment affect the development of human civilization? Pretty simple. Now, a lot of people think it is simple, but they don't really apply it. I'm like, hello, we have a river to cross here. Okay? Now, geography pines pretty much provides the stages of development where history drama unfolds in a lot of cases, okay? It affected trade, conflict, and settlement. What would that be? Now, if you looked at the 4 pillars of civilization, Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Indus River Valley, there's your first clue. Okay, and the Yellow River Valley in China. Where did civilizations develop? Just not in the middle of the Arctic, not in the middle of the Sahara, not in the middle of the rainforest. They developed on river valleys, very fertile river valleys. Now, civilization we couldn't settle down and farm if we didn't have these fertile river valleys. And one thing about trade is, if you take the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, this is your communication line. So this was great. We built boats, trade up and down the rivers, and the cities were all built where near the rivers. All right, they weren't built way the hell out in the mountains. All right, there's no cabin out there. We built upon our environment necessarily what we needed to do. All right, if there's a famine in the area for too long, what do? We move. Right? So we had to develop a lot of things, and we developed those 4 pillars of civilization, the 4 corners of civilization. So it was pretty interesting in the sense of that, because we learned that in ancient history. It's just like, wow, this is where geography affects. Where did Egypt form? All along the Nile. It didn't form 100 miles from the Nile. Some people, well, there's an oasis out there, and that's where Alexander went to go see his swan. Yeah, one place. Yeah, that's what argue a lot of fucking people will do that. Well, no. Where's 9.9% of civilizations located? Right along the Nile Delta. Period. Right? One shack, one hippo out there, one hermit is not going to change anything. So, they'll argue that there's people that will fight you that history is so stupid. We're going to avoid that bullshit. Right? So, this is why the physical geography is important to explain history, because we were on these rivers. Up and down these rivers, we did the trade, we did communication, we had our water sources for irrigation, we have developed agriculture to feed our fields, product of our environment. You put us in that environment, we adapt it, and that's what came up with civilization. Especially when you started domesticating animals and plants, which is pretty interesting enough on a scientific term how we did that. Today we take it for granted. We don't know where this shit come from. Somebody came up with it. Chances are it was a mother for plants. Guys probably domesticated animals. 100%. Kind of matches the criteria of what we are. Alright. Now, one thing too, like you take the Holy Roman, or not the Holy Roman Empire, but you take the Roman Empire. Where was its natural borders? Along the Danube and Rhine rivers. Now, natural borders. We base it upon the geography of the land. It's easier to have a natural border at a river, easier to defend, especially in ancient times. That's why the Romans struggled a lot across those major rivers, European rivers, to hold on to any land on the other side. Very difficult. Okay, very, very difficult. Alright, remember when the Alps and mountain ranges all became natural defense barriers. But you'll have that guy like Hannibal in the Second Punic War that decided to go over it and surprise. Pretty good war effort. Right? Because Rome was thinking that's a natural defense. That's where we're at. Who's going to go over the Alps? Well, a madman. That's what it takes. That's what it takes. And you'll learn that in history. The one that's really out of there is the one that, yeah, he's going to make history. Not do anything. Change the game. But human environment is something else. Alright? So we affect on that. If there's Great Plains, we settled there. You know, we adapted to wherever we needed, right? And the environment affects us all, same as the weather. You have rainy seasons. We are a product, civilization is a product of its environment and our development. It affected our development. If the resources weren't in your area, what you do? You went to other places and raided them. Oh, but also trade, right? Wars were started like that. Trade was started like that. Human interaction and connection started to happen. So it's pretty interesting on that scale. Now, how does geography influence and affect history itself? It's something else, okay? We'll take something simple as economy and resources like trade and things like this. Natural resources like minerals and timber, alright? Now, navigable waterways, sheltered harbors, things like this, dedicated trade, industrial development over time, shaping and, economic powerhouses like Rome. When Rome owned the entire Mediterranean world, wonder why they become so wealthy. Trade by boat, right? Nothing, everything flooded to Rome. Think, for instance, for Rome, we're going to use a lot of Rome here today. I was going to use a lot of Russia, but we're going to use Rome today. Think Rome. What was Egypt called? It just wasn't just called the grain basket of the Mediterranean world for nothing. So why would that benefit? Now, grain never grew like grain grew anywhere else in the Mediterranean world like it flourished in Egypt. That's the geographical features of that region. How does it affect them? Well, for the Egyptians, the Romans showed up. We need Egypt to feed Rome. We're taking it. And where did most of the shipments for grain to feed the masses during gladiatorial events and a lot of the emperors giving out free bread? Where did that come from? Egypt. Now imagine if they didn't have Egypt. They would have to trade, a lot more paperwork, but they owned it, so they could just take it. Feed the million masses in Rome. So, that's how geography and history actually read each other. If that wasn't like that, the geography, history would be written differently. You have to keep that in mind. And like I just mentioned, borders and natural defenses, and like oceans, deserts, mountains, rivers, these are all natural defenses that would define a region, alright? Because it's easy to defend on a river. The fuckers got to cross the river. All you have to do is sit on the other shore and wait. Pick them off in the water? Absolutely. Sink their boats, little rafts they come across. It's easy to defend, isn't it? That set the stage for the Roman Empire. That was its final frontier. You could not expand across that, right? And it happens a lot throughout history. And a lot of countries, even today, still have that ancient borders. The border's a river. The border's a mountain range. Okay. Let's take Eastern Canada. The Great Lakes is a good border for Canada State. So you look at the geography and like, well, that's the reason. And why would that be important? A lot of trade and a lot of commerce flows to the Great Lakes. But it flows into the St. Lawrence, which Canada has. We have the mouth. Well, thanks for that. Right? So, you know. Also, geography influences social life and cultural life and development. Okay? Constantly does that. Okay? Like clothing. You're going to have warmer clothing. Like, take the Vikings. You're going to have warmer clothes and furs. Furs didn't really exist in the South because it was hot. So that's your physical temperament. Different kinds of clothes. Because you have to adapt to the different environments that you're in. And that's what humans have done since the dawn of time. We adapted to our environments. And we always have adapted. But I wanted to actually do another series just on more about the history, geography, and the marriage between the two. There's a lot in it. I remember in university, it was literally a whole week course. There's actually a whole seminar, just a whole 4 months of history, geography. So you have to go through, investigate as a historian, find patterns, find the reasons why. This is not because it just drew the borders there for no reason. There's a reason, and chances are it's a natural reason. So, based upon geography. Okay? But just to wrap up what history is, okay, and why is it significant? One thing with history is the study of change, remember, okay? You gotta keep that in mind. It's about to understand the evolution, the transformation, I would say, of human life, civilization, and development within its environment. And a lot of it is pretty stagnant and statistical facts, which is awesome. But one thing history will show you is change is inevitable. Adapt or fuck off and die. That's pretty much how even geography, we have to go with it, right? So, I hate to tell you, right? One thing with history too, it brings you the human memory. Remember, history is also the product of what you are today, of all your experiences and everything before you. You are a product of all that today. So it explains your current position, why you believe what you believe, why you do what you do, why you think the way you think. That's all your past. That's a product. You're a product of your past. So no matter what, everyone has a different story. Keep that in mind. This is called grassroots history. Alright, but we all have a collective one. That's my job. That's what I like to do. The collective, the most big one, the big picture. That's what I'm good at. Not the small one. I don't care about this handmaiden that lived in the 18th century that had to give birth to 2 people on the side of the street in a cabin somewhere. I don't really care about the Maid's Tale, okay? Which is a really good book, a diary of the time, but I really don't care about it. It's not mine. Alright. I read it because I need a little bit of information out of it, but that's about it. Human memory. It serves as the human collective memory history does. And when you do it, this is all of our experiences, this is all of our lessons, this is everything that happened before us that we have to preserve for future generations. That's the idea. What was the first one? History is past is to be preserved. Right? To explain the present and to pretty much learn the lessons from everything to that point for future generations. That's pretty much how it goes to be a good historian. And one thing that I look at as a historian is a historian, to be a good person into history itself and the significance of it, as well as a historian, is basically you're a record keeper of humanity's triumphs, like tragedies, our dreams, our nightmares, and most importantly, all of our memories to continue our past, from our past, to understand the world we live in today, but also see where we're going and to preserve it for future generations to know. So you also do it in a family unit. Remember number 3 of the 10 reasons? Well, identity. Well, that's your family, national, and self-identity is your past. You're not based upon your present. You know, most people think of now. Well, now comes from the past, and the past That's why you serve it. So, when you serve two masters, it also goes on a personal level. You serve your past. Because everything that happened in the past, you can serve it or you can conquer it. Right? On a psychological aspect. Right? You can let it rule you or you can rule it. But with history, you have to serve because you have to rule the present as a historian. So you get a chance of serving and ruling in a lot of senses. So, but basically, to be a good historian, it's a lot. All right, one of the best Russian writers and philosophers of all time. And but first, I want to talk about Bismarck. He's one of my favorite politicians of all time, Otto von Bismarck. He is a genius. He's one of the top guys that I would like to go back in time and sit down, have a good old hoot, go out on a Friday night, drink and party, and just discuss politics all weekend. Because this guy was a genius. He's one of my favorite politicians, statesmen of all time. And I read a lot of his works. I wrote a lot of papers on him, and I thoroughly love this guy and what he done. One of his best quotes is like, "Only a fool learns from his own mistakes. A wise man learns from the mistakes of others." So when someone asks you, "What did you learn?" Like, I don't have to experience that. I learned from somebody else. You tell them you're wise and not a fool. Because you're going to make your own mistakes. That's natural. But you do not have to repeat the mistakes of others. Alright? You can learn. It was like, I learned a lot growing up what not to do from my brother. I didn't have to go down that road to find out, oh fuck. Yeah, why the hell would I want to go down that road? It doesn't look too pleasant. I learned from others. Why would I need to go and waste my time when someone else, they did it, save me the hassle? And you do the same for others. It goes both ways. You don't even realize it. It goes both ways. So, but, and Bismarck said that, and that expresses history in itself. We learn from the past. It's like, we don't need to make those mistakes. We're going to make new ones, fresh ones. Unfortunately, this is life. We're going to make fresh ones. Then hopefully future generations will actually learn, be like, well, we can't leave. We can't vote those libtards in again for another term. Well, obviously, 8 years of history, we didn't learn nothing, and we voted them in again, and then we got a carny. This is what I mean. People just don't learn. So, not even from their own history timeline that they live in. They forget what happened fucking yesterday, apparently. Oh, wait. They're probably too high on pot to fucking care. So, one of my favorite, though, to describe a historian is basically by Leo Trotsky, the famous writer and philosopher, okay? He lived from 1828 to 1910. He is one of the most notorious in Russian literature. I love him. He's the guy that wrote War and Peace. Okay? That really thick book that if you had enough of them, you could build a house. Really thick brick. We couldn't shoot a bullet through it. So thick. But it's a good read. And you only want to read it once because it takes you forever to read it. It took me a year to read it when I was a kid. Well, a teenager anyway. And plus I had to read for university, but by then I already read it, so I just had to skim through it. It's great. Because I learned from others. It's like, why do I need to read all these books when I get there when I could read them down and enjoy my time doing other things and experiencing the high life university days? Yeah, grandmother said I was wise beyond my years, but I didn't believe her. I thought she was still crazy. But, now he quoted is, a good historian must be fearless, uncorrupt, free, and the friend of truth and of liberty. Okay, he's a man with no country, a man with no identity, a man or a woman in modern times, okay? Alright, he has to have no shame and remorse. He has to have shame and remorse and have that human connection. And Trotsky said this, and that describes historian. Because you can't be biased. You have to agree what the truth is. I know even Russian history, I'm a Russian enthusiast, and I found out things that what I believed in Russia was like, awesome, this is Russia, but they didn't find the truth, and it kind of hurts, but you're like, no, don't. I was more civilized than most. To me, I moved on pretty quick from it. I was like, well, it's the truth. That's what the Russians did. It's horrible. It doesn't really hurt the image for me, but it's like, damn. But I was like, well, found the truth, and that's what it is, right? Like the Polish onslaught. Like, I don't think the Russians did that. It was the Germans. Well, if you look at all the evidence and everything that was brought out of archives, yeah, it was the Russians. Fuck. I was pretty disappointed that day, but then I was like, well, found out the truth anyway. It's the job of a historian. You find out the truth no matter what it is, and you accept it for what it is. You can't be unbiased. You got to say Hitler was a good leader. Yeah, he was. Without Hitler, Germany would not have been as great as it was in the 1930s. Right? You got to realize that fact. Despite how horrific of a man that he turned out to be, he did good for Germany in those years. You got to realize it. Hate his guts, but that's the facts. Facts are facts. So, what do you do? Right? So, like, a historian has to be unbiased, has to search for the truth, has to be fearless and stand up for what they believe in. If you put a thesis out there, however obscene it says, and you have the evidence to back it up, stand firm on it until you're proven wrong, which you expect it to be proven wrong, or you're proven right. Simple. So, you gotta do all those things. You gotta have a little bit of shame, pity, and empathy. And this is all things that are taught when you learn history. And this is the importance of it as a discipline and as something that we should learn constantly in school and put more endeavors on it. Not just write papers. Alright? More cultural awareness, more understanding of the world that we live in. Because it's based upon our geography. Keep that in mind. We are products of our environment. Okay? So, we're also products of our past. So, combine the both, well, you got history. Without one, you can't explain the other when it comes to geography. But we're not going to do a series on that, just history and geography. The greatest union among ideas, alright? It's the Soviet Union of two disciplines. And it's something you really learn in university your first and second year, as being a historian. And for me, I studied a lot of these two comparisons, the importance of these two. And one doesn't explain without the other. Remember, geography is the canvas, and history is the paint. So, it shows forth human development up to the present day. That's why the world the way it is today. On a political scale. Why people where they are today. Okay? Due to everything that we live on this planet. We are slaves to the environment. So, as much as humans like to control everything, pretty naive in ignorance. Ignorance is bliss. Remember what Aristotle said? Alright? The only evil is ignorance. Not Aristotle, but Socrates said. So, he was right. But to wrap up this entire two-part series, this is what we're going to do. The next series is going to be on a pretty long, lengthy series on all this is going to apply in these two parts to the next series. So if you keep everything in mind of this two series, is whatever. Up to you. Don't give a fuck. Okay? It's up to you. But your choice, free will, God gave you it. You left the Garden of Eden. There you go. Okay? So, however the hell you want to put it, you got the freedom to. But it's all going to apply to the next seminars and the other two series, current events and historical seminar or sermons. So a little bit different because we'll be looking at the Bible. Believe it or not, a lot of primary sources like Herodotus back up the Bible, and the Bible backs it up. It's kind of crazy. You learn a lot of more crazy things in history as you get older. But that's how that goes. So you got to remember this. And so to be a good historian, or you're going to be a history buff, remember the two kinds of history buffs. Remember the 10 reasons of being a historian anyway, and the importance, the 10 reasons, the significant importance of why you should know history. And when you do, you got two options. You can just know the facts, which is great. You need to know those. Or you can know the facts, but know how to connect them. And pattern recognition is huge. So in the connection to history, you have to connect the dots. Everything's linked. It's one big web. But the difference is it's pretty much like a dot board. You just got a bunch of dots, a bunch of turning points. Your job is to find the connections between them. Now remember my analogy of the tree. You have roots, trunk, foliage, or canopy. So in the next seminar, we're going to be looking at the roots, and then the trunk, and then the after effects. So cause and effect, right? These did that very well, right? And he's a scientific father of history. But anyways, besides that, until next time, the next time series, I'm doing a few other ones too. So, I had people. There's one I have to do on a few comments that I made, and I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to do that one. It's gonna be definitely related to a lot of things. So, we'll get to that point. But this is pretty much the history of history. This is just pretty much a 2-hour sum up of the history of history, of the important pieces. To actually learn the history of history takes, I don't know, in the sense of hours, probably 40 hours. Because it's a whole course in university. So, everything has its own origins, right? You do, I do. What is it? And through my seminars, you learn pieces of my life, of how it applies to history and the moral lessons of it. So, right? So, like, my first passion was geography, which led me to my greatest passion, which was my sole passion, history. So, just like a Christian daily bread, history is mine. I can't get enough of it. It was a drug. I overdosed years ago and I'm dead. If it was a hooker with an STD, I would have got the STD already. History is it's a drive force. I'm glad I found it in my life, and I have to thank Sue as his husband, my teacher in grade 9, for really encouraging me. And throughout the course, even in my high school years, I had a teacher that encouraged me even further, and my professors encouraged me in university. So there's knowing it, but if you don't have a passion for it, then it's just not it. It's just not it. So either or. But that's how she goes, right? So just keep practicing, keep reading your history, whatever you need to do. But one fucking thing I'm going to tell you right now, if you're around and you get your history facts wrong, I am going to be lividly pissed. Because one thing of my pet peeves is that, and I hate when people get history wrong, and I hate people that just sit there and talk about facts. They're brain dead, okay? If you just know that, I want you to explain why the war happened at this day. Then if you just say you don't know, then you're just a walking fact machine. Nothing wrong with that. You know your facts, that's great. Alright? So, but we are going to do an origins, basically, seminar next. A lot of sequences. We're going through a lot. We're going way deeper. I mean, we're looking way deeper into a lot of the causes. So, of such an event that we're going to discuss next. Believe it or not, it's not in Russian history. That's the only clue you're not getting. Okay, so as a historian, you have to go outside your bounds. That was my first seminar and conference that I was gone to, and I went outside my bounds. My professor at the time, he's like, "You didn't do Russian history?" I was like, "No, I went outside my bounds." He's like, "That's a good historian. You have to go outside your comfort zone once in a while." But this is actually in my comfort zone, because this is one of the seminars that I took in my 4th year, and I loved it. Well, actually my 3rd year. I actually loved it. Full year course at the time, and it's all about it. And it's part of a bigger program called War Studies. There's your hint. Do some investigation. So, part of a historian. So, anyways, until next time, just keep your stick on the ice. Also remember that liberalism was good in the 1800s, and it inbred it with itself a lot, and now today we got libtardism. So just remember that, and you'll get through the day and Vote the Liberals out next time you get a chance in the next election. Don't let history repeat itself. Period.